Emma thought sleepwalking was harmless, until her little brother began wandering into the woods at night, whispering about voices calling his name. Every night he slipped through locked doors, drawn by something ancient lurking in the trees. What started as a strange pattern became a chilling nightmare rooted in an age-old legend. Children had vanished before. Now it was happening again. Emma was the only one who could stop it, but the forest doesn't give up its secrets, or its chosen ones. What she uncovered was more terrifying than any dream. This isn't just a sleepwalking story, it's something much darker. Some stories dig into your bones and never quite let go. And this one, it crawls in, quietly, until you can't stop thinking about it. Sleepwalking Horror Stories takes you on a chilling, hour-long journey with Emma, a young woman who returns home from college expecting peace and quiet. What she gets instead is a terrifying mystery when her 10-year-old brother, Noah, begins sleepwalking in the middle of the night. But this isn't normal sleepwalking. He walks through locked doors, stands outside in the dead of night, and whispers of voices calling him, voices from the trees. At first, Emma thinks it's stress, maybe even childhood imagination. But then, she finds Noah whispering to the basement door or standing in the yard with glassy eyes, repeating chilling phrases. She starts investigating and uncovers the dark history of their town. Vanished children, forgotten legends, and ancient stone. Circles buried in the woods. What follows is a heart-racing race against time to uncover the truth and break a centuries-old pattern before it claims Noah. And maybe her too. From eerie forests and haunted dreams to spine-tingling encounters with forces beyond understanding, this isn't just a story. It's an experience. A slow-burn descent into a horrifying truth that leaves a lasting mark. If you love atmospheric horror, folklore, and stories with emotional depth and unexpected twists, you're in for something unforgettable. The first time it happened, Emma thought she was dreaming. It was well past midnight and the world outside was cloaked in that deep, unnatural silence that only comes in the dead of night. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air is holding its breath. Emma lay awake in bed, scrolling through her phone under the covers trying to quiet the anxious thoughts that came with being back home. The house felt different without her parents there. Quieter. Too quiet. Every creak in the walls felt exaggerated. Every shadow stretched a little too long. She had just turned off her phone when she heard it, the soft click of a door. At first, she thought it might be the wind, but then came the faint sound of footsteps. Bare feet on tile. Slow. Dragging. Her heart gave a tiny jolt. She sat up, holding her breath, listening. The sound moved past her room and toward the back of the house. She got out of bed and quietly opened her door. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of the nightlight plugged into the wall near the bathroom. She called out softly, "Noah?" No answer. A chill ran down her spine. Emma tiptoed past the hallway mirror, catching her reflection. A pale face with wide eyes and messy hair, barely recognizable. She made her way to Noah's room and pushed. The door open. Empty. The blankets were in a tangled heap on the floor, and the window was closed. She hurried to the back door, her stomach tightening. The door was still locked, just as she'd left it before bed. But something made her look outside anyway. There, in the middle of the backyard, stood her little brother. Noah was barefoot in his Spider-Man pajamas, standing motionless in the wet grass, his arms limp at his sides. His head was tilted slightly, upward, eyes wide open, but he wasn't looking at anything. He wasn't seeing. Emma froze, her heart thudding. She fumbled with the lock and burst outside. The cold air hit her like a slap. The grass was slick with dew, soaking her socks instantly. She ran to Noah and grabbed his shoulders. "Noah," she said, louder this time. "What are you doing out here?" He didn't flinch. His skin was cold to the touch. His eyes, glassy and blank, stared into nothing. It was like he wasn't even there. She shook him gently. "Noah, wake up." And then, just like that, his eyes blinked. His body shuddered, and he looked around in confusion. "Em?" he said, his voice sleepy and small. What's going on?" "You're outside," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Do you remember coming out here?" He shook his head slowly. "No. I was in bed. I heard something, a voice." "A voice?" "Yeah," he said, still groggy. "It was calling my name. From the trees." Emma turned her head toward the forest behind their backyard, a thick line of trees just beyond the fence. They had always seemed normal before, but now, under the moonlight, they looked different. Taller, darker, watching. She guided Noah back inside, locking the door behind them with trembling fingers. She dried his feet and tucked him into bed, staying beside him until he drifted off again. But Emma didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. She sat by the window, staring out at the still trees, listening for whispers. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel safe in her own home. Emma told herself it had been a one-time thing, a strange, random fluke. Kids sleepwalked sometimes. That's what the internet said. Stress, growth spurts. Maybe Noah was having weird dreams, or maybe he was just adjusting to their parents being gone. It was easy to make excuses during the day. In the light, things always seemed more manageable, more logical. But by the second night, logic began to slip through her fingers. It started the same way. A soft sound. Bare feet on wood. Emma jolted awake with a strange feeling in her chest, like her heart knew something her mind hadn't caught up with yet. She threw off her blanket and rushed to Noah's room. Empty again. This time, she didn't waste a second. She sprinted down the hallway and flung the front door open. Noah was standing at the edge of the driveway, his small figure silhouetted under the flickering orange glow of the street lamp. The road was quiet. Not a single car, not a single sound. He wasn't moving. Emma ran to him, her breath catching as she reached his side. His eyes were open again, blank like the night before, his lips slightly parted. He was whispering. She leaned in closer. "They're calling me." "From the trees," he mumbled. Emma's skin prickled. "Noah," she whispered, shaking his arm. "You need to wake up." He blinked, looked up at her with bleary confusion, and let out a shaky breath like he'd just come out of a trance. I was in bed," he said again, his voice trembling. Then I heard them again. "Who's them, Noah?" He frowned. "The ones in the forest. They sound like kids. But different." Emma didn't ask more. She didn't want to hear the answer. The third night was worse. She tried to prevent it this time. She stacked a chair under the doorknob of Noah's room, placed her sleeping bag just outside his door, and kept the lights on. She even tied a little bell to the handle so she'd hear if it moved. But sleep still came for her. And when she opened her eyes again, the door was open. The chair had been moved. The bell was on the floor. Noah was gone. Panic hit her like a wave. She stumbled to her feet and bolted through the house. She found him inside the hallway closet, curled up in the dark like a cat in hiding. The closet light was off. The door cracked just enough for her to see him. He was whispering again, too quiet for her to make out the words. His eyes glowed faintly in the shadows. When she pulled him out, he clung to her like he'd just escaped from something awful. "I didn't want to go," he said between sobs. "They were pulling me." I told them no, but they didn't stop. Emma held him tight, pressing her face into his hair. "You're safe," she whispered. "I've got you." But, even as she said it, she wasn't sure it was true. Over the next few days, Emma became obsessed. She kept a notebook by her bed, jotting down the time and details of every incident. She started recording video on her phone, hoping to catch something, anything that would explain what was happening. She installed a baby monitor in Noah's room. She set up alarms on the doors. She even ordered motion sensors online with overnight shipping. Her days became filled with frantic research: sleepwalking, night terrors, child psychology. She read forums of parents sharing stories of their sleepwalking kids, but none of them sounded like this. None of them mentioned voices calling from the trees. Noah changed too. He became quieter, jumpy. He avoided looking out the windows. He started drawing pictures, charcoal smudges on white paper, trees, dark shapes in the branches, eyes, so many eyes. One picture showed a child standing in a circle of stones in the middle of the woods, arms outstretched like they were being summoned. Emma found it folded under his pillow. When she asked him about it, he just said, "I didn't draw it." By the end of the week, Emma felt like she was unraveling. Her sleep was thin and broken. Her body ached. Every night was a battle to keep Noah safe, and every morning felt like they were one step closer to something she couldn't explain, something that was pulling him away from her. Then came the night she found him at the basement door. It was just after 3 a.m. Noah was kneeling in front of the door, whispering to it like he was praying. The basement was locked. They never used it, just storage and dust. But that night, Noah's hand was resting on the doorknob like he meant to open it. Emma crouched down and gently touched his shoulder. "Noah," she whispered. He turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see the wet trail of a tear running down his cheek. "I don't want to go," he said softly, "but they said if I don't, they'll come up instead." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Come up from where?" she asked, almost afraid to know. He didn't answer. He just stood, walked back to bed, and lay down like nothing had happened. But Emma stood there for a long time, staring at the door to the basement. It seemed colder than usual. The air around it heavier. She placed her hand against it, and for just a second, she felt something move on the other side. Emma had never believed in legends. She'd grown up in Willow Creek, a quiet, tucked-away town where the most exciting stories usually involved a lost dog or a church bake sale scandal. Ghost stories and local folklore were things kids whispered at sleepovers to make each other scream and laugh. They weren't real. They weren't supposed to be. But Noah's eyes told a different story. The drawings, the sleepwalking, the whispers. Something was happening, and it wasn't normal. After the basement incident, Emma decided she couldn't rely on sleep apps, baby monitors, or internet forums anymore. She needed answers. Real ones. The kind buried in old pages and half-forgotten memories. So, on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, she made her way to the Willow Creek Public Library. The library hadn't changed since she was a kid. It still smelled like old paper and lemon polish. The same dusty carpet. The same sleepy-looking librarian, Mrs. Adler, now well into her 70s but still wearing that same floral cardigan she'd worn every day since Emma was in 4th grade. Emma asked to see the archive room, the one that held all the old newspapers, school records, and microfilm collections. Mrs. Adler raised a tired eyebrow. "School project?" Emma hesitated. "Something like that." The archive room was downstairs, past a creaky stairwell and behind a thick wooden door that smelled faintly out of mildew. The room was cold, dimly lit by a buzzing fluorescent bulb, and lined with filing cabinets and old shelves bowed from the weight of forgotten history. Emma began combing through the newspapers first. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for. Just some thread, some clue that someone else had experienced what Noah was going through. For over an hour, she found nothing. Just old reports of town festivals, retirement announcements, football games. Then she saw the headline. Local boy vanishes in night. Family reports sleepwalking episode. Emma's fingers froze. She pulled the yellowed article from its folder and carefully spread it open on the table. It was dated May 17th, 1983. 10-year-old Daniel Wexler was last, seen around midnight, leaving his family home on Sycamore Lane. His parents believe he was sleepwalking, something he had reportedly done several times over the past month. Local search teams followed Daniel's footprints into the woods behind the neighborhood, but the trail vanished near a cluster of old stones. Despite extensive efforts, Daniel was never found. Emma's eyes locked on one line near the bottom of the article. Friends say Daniel claimed to hear voices in the forest. He told them they were calling his name at night. Her pulse quickened. Daniel Wexler had lived on Sycamore Lane. That was just 2 blocks from her house. She pulled more files. Dug deeper, 63. A girl named Lena Morris, 8 years old, vanished after multiple episodes of sleepwalking. Last seen, near the edge of the woods. 43, Thomas Bell, 11. Went missing after saying he dreamed of the forest children every 20 years. Almost like clockwork. Each child had complained of the same thing. Voices. Each had been last seen near the forest behind the neighborhood, and each had disappeared without a trace. Emma sat in the archive room for a long time, staring at the clippings spread out in front of her like puzzle pieces. She traced her finger along the pictures of the missing children, feeling something twist inside her. A terrible realization. Noah wasn't the first, and if the pattern was real, he might not be the last. A soft knock startled her. Mrs. Adler stood in the doorway, holding a manila folder. "I thought this might help," the old woman said gently. "You're looking into the forest, aren't you?" Emma blinked. "You know about it?" Mrs. Adler nodded slowly, her expression grim. "My brother used to talk in his sleep," she said quietly. "Back in the 60s. Said the same thing. Heard someone calling his name. He disappeared when I was 12. They never found him." Emma stared at her. "Why didn't anyone do anything?" she whispered. "They did," Mrs. Adler replied, "but no one believed them. People don't like stories that don't make sense. They forget them. Let them fade." She handed Emma the folder. "But some of us remember." Emma opened it. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the woods behind their neighborhood. Circles marked different areas, one labeled Stone Circle, another marked Old Well. There were notes scribbled in the margins. "Don't go alone. Cold spots. Voices strongest here." At the bottom, written in shaky handwriting, "They want the children. Always the children." Emma left the library in the pouring rain, the folder clutched tightly to her chest. The streets of Willow Creek felt darker somehow. Smaller, like the town had shrunk in on itself under the weight of secrets too old to die. She drove home in silence, her mind racing. The dots were connecting now, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Noah's episodes weren't random. They were part of something older, something that had been happening for generations, and it was her job to stop it, because if she didn't, if she waited too long, Noah might become another name in the archives, another child whispered about in the dark. The forest had always been there, stretching like a quiet wall at the edge of the neighborhood, a place of crooked trees, soft soil, and half-remembered dares from childhood. But Emma had never gone deep into it. No one really did. It was the kind of place that parents warned their kids to avoid, the kind of place where lost things stayed lost. But now, it was calling, and Emma was listening. She stood at the edge of the trees just after sunrise, gripping the worn map from the library in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The air was cool and damp, thick with the scent of moss and morning dew. Behind her, the town was waking up. Birds chirped. A lawnmower roared somewhere in the distance, but ahead, nothing. The forest waited in silence. Noah was safe at a neighbor's house, still asleep when Emma slipped out the door. She had lied and said she was running errands. There was no way she'd risk taking him with her, not after what she'd read, not with what she might find. Emma took her first step past the tree line. Immediately, the world shifted. The air changed. Cooler. Still, as if she had stepped through an invisible curtain into somewhere else, somewhere older. The light dimmed, filtered through layers of tangled branches. Leaves crunched beneath her boots, and every now and then, she caught the sound of something moving in the underbrush. A quick rustle, a snap, then silence. She followed the map carefully. The trail it described wasn't marked, not really. Just subtle turns, old trees with strange scars, clusters of rocks that served as vague landmarks. The further she went, the less she trusted her sense of direction. She checked her phone. No signal. Figures. Emma pressed on. After nearly 40 minutes of hiking, she came upon the first real marker. A large, moss-covered boulder shaped like a sleeping dog. The map labeled it Watcher. Next to it was a note scrawled in tiny letters. Turn right, 3 minutes to the circle. Her heart thumped louder now. She could feel it, something just ahead. The forest grew thicker, the trees older, their trunks twisted and hollow in places. The ground became uneven, and every step sounded too loud, like the woods were listening. Then, through the trees, she saw it. A clearing. At the center stood a ring of stones, 12 of them, arranged in a perfect circle, each about 3 feet, tall and covered in moss, their surfaces carved with faint, ancient-looking symbols that time had tried to erase. The stone circle. It was real. Emma stepped into the clearing cautiously. The moment her boot crossed the circle's edge, the sounds of the forest stopped. Completely. No birds. No wind. Nothing. She stood still, trying to steady her breathing. Her flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. This place felt wrong. Not evil exactly. Just off, like it didn't belong in this world. She knelt beside one of the stones and brushed away the moss. The symbols beneath looked like a mixture of runes and scratches. They didn't make sense, but something about them felt familiar, like they weren't meant to be read. They were meant to be felt. Suddenly, a whisper floated through the air, soft, so faint Emma thought she imagined it. Emma. She spun around. No one. Then it came again. Emma. The voice was low, childlike, echoing faintly, as if carried on wind that wasn't there. She clutched the flashlight tighter. "Who's there?" she called. No answer, only the trees. She took a step back and nearly screamed. In the dirt near the far side of the circle were footprints, small ones, bare feet, deeply pressed into the earth, as if the person who made them had been standing there for a long, long time. They led away from the circle, into the deeper part of the woods. Emma hesitated. She knew she should turn back. Get out. Go home. But something inside her, curiosity, desperation, fear, pushed her forward. She followed the trail slowly, her ears straining for any sound, her eyes darting to every movement. The forest grew darker. The trees leaned closer. Then, just ahead, she saw it, a sunken clearing where the earth dipped like a shallow bowl. In the center stood something strange, an old, rusted well, partially hidden by vines and fallen branches. It didn't belong there. The stones were too smooth, too round, like they had been placed long ago with purpose. Emma stepped closer, her mouth dry. She wiped away some vines, and froze. Scratched into the rim of the well, in crude, jagged letters, was a name. Noe. Her knees buckled. She stared at it, her breath caught in her chest. And then, another whisper. This one was right behind her ear. We almost had him. Emma screamed and turned, her flashlight shaking, but the woods were empty, completely empty. She backed away from the well, her heart pounding, legs trembling. Something shifted in the shadows to her right. A tall figure? A branch? She couldn't tell. The forest was closing in again. She ran. Emma didn't stop until she broke through the tree line and saw her car. She collapsed into the driver's seat, gasping, her clothes damp with sweat and dirt. She looked back at the woods. They looked calm, innocent. But she knew the truth now. Something lived in those trees. Something old. Something patient. And it had. Marked Noah. The front door was open. That was the first thing Emma saw as she pulled into the driveway, her tires crunching over gravel. The morning sun had risen fully now, casting long golden rays across the front yard. But the warmth in the light didn't reach her skin. Her stomach dropped. She slammed the car into park and sprinted toward the house. Noah! The house was too quiet. She ran inside, calling his name louder this time. Noah! The neighbor's son, Liam, was supposed to be watching him. Just for a few hours. Emma had even packed a small backpack with snacks and his favorite, comic books. But now the living room was empty. The bag sat untouched on the couch. A glass of juice sat half-drunk on the table, and the TV was frozen on a cartoon menu screen, as if someone had hit pause and never came back. Emma's chest tightened, checked every room, the bathroom, the bedrooms, the backyard. Nothing. She found Liam's number and dialed with shaking hands. He answered after the third ring, his voice groggy. "Hey, what's up?" "Liam, where's Noah?" A pause. "What do you mean?" I thought. "He came back home. He said you were already there." Emma's blood ran cold. "I never came to get him." Silence on the other end. I only left him for a minute," Liam stammered. "He was playing with that old walkie-talkie. I went to the kitchen, and when I came back, he was gone. I thought maybe you picked him up. But Emma wasn't listening anymore. The walkie-talkie. It had belonged to their dad, an old dented thing with a cracked antenna. Noah had found it in a storage bin a few weeks ago and had been obsessed with it ever since. Even though it didn't work properly, he carried it around the house pretending to talk to imaginary friends. Only now, Emma wasn't so sure they were imaginary. She was back in the car in seconds, retracing her steps toward the forest. Every instinct screamed against it, but she knew where Noah had gone. She could feel it in her bones, the way you can feel a storm before it breaks. She parked at the edge of the woods and plunged in without hesitation this time. The trees closed around her like a cage. The air turned colder, heavier, as if the forest remembered her. She followed the same path, past the sleeping boulder, through the thickest parts of the underbrush. Her muscles burned, her breath came in short, panicked bursts, but she didn't stop. "Noah!" she shouted. "Noah, can you hear me?" The forest didn't answer, but then, static, soft, crackling static. It was faint, but real, coming from somewhere to her right. She turned toward it, her ears straining, and then she heard his voice, just barely, coming through the walkie-talkie. Ma!" Her heart leapt. "Noah, where are you?" "They don't want me to leave." The voice was laced with static, broken far away, but it was his, undeniably his. Emma pushed through the trees, the branches clawing at her arms and legs. She tripped once, twice, scrambled back to her feet, blood running down her shin. The well came into view, dark, sunken, looming like a mouth frozen in mid-scream. The walkie-talkie lay at its base, its green light still blinking, but Noah was nowhere in sight. Emma grabbed it, pressing the button hard. "Noah, talk to me. Where are you?" Nothing. Then, behind her, a whisper. Closer. She turned slowly. One of the stone pillars was there. One she hadn't seen before. Out of place. It hadn't been in the clearing the first time. It stood alone, half buried in dirt and tangled roots, and something about it pulled at her mind. Drawn to it, she stepped forward, and that's when she saw it. Footprints, leading past the pillar. Deeper. "Noah," she whispered and followed. The trail twisted through trees that seemed to lean inward, as if trying to listen. The deeper she went, the less the forest looked like the one she knew. The colors faded. The trees no longer looked like oaks or pines. They were something else, gnarled and bent in impossible shapes. The footprints grew fresher. She crested a small hill and stopped dead in her tracks. At the bottom was a clearing, and in the center stood Noah. His back was to her. His arms were stretched out. And surrounding him was a perfect ring of stones, just like the one she had seen before. But this one was larger, older. The air around it shimmered like heat on pavement, even though the forest was cold. "Noah!" she screamed, racing down the hill, but as she stepped toward the circle, her feet hit something invisible, like a wall. She bounced back, stumbling to the ground. Noah didn't turn. He was murmuring something now. Words she couldn't understand. A language that felt wrong in her ears. And then, the shadows moved, shapes gathered at the edge of the clearing. Children, or the memory of children. Pale faces, hollow eyes. Some barefoot, others wearing old-fashioned clothes stained with dirt and time. They stood silently, watching Noah, whispering in voices only he could hear. Emma pounded on the invisible barrier. "Let him go. He's not yours." Noah finally turned. His eyes were distant, glowing faintly. But when he saw her, really saw her, something changed. His lips trembled. "Emma," he whispered. "Come to me, Noah. Please." The circle of children began to move, stepping closer. Their whispers rose in volume, a chant building in the air. "Noah, stay. Noah, stay." Emma didn't think. She threw the walkie-talkie. It sailed through the barrier and hit the ground beside him with a crack. The static burst out again, loud, chaotic, and for a moment, the children paused. Noah looked down at the device. Something clicked in his eyes. A tear rolled down his cheek, and then he ran, straight into Emma's arms. The forest screamed. Wind howled through the trees as if the whole world was tearing apart. The clearing twisted around them, branches lashing, the ground rumbling beneath their feet. Emma held Noah tight and ran harder than she'd ever run before, back through the trees, over the hill, past the well, past the circle. The shadows followed, but only so far. At the edge of the woods, the air shifted again. The wind stopped. Silence. She collapsed in the grass. Noah clutched against her, both of them shaking. "You came for me," he whispered. "Always," she said, her voice breaking. Behind them, the forest stood still. But Emma knew. It wasn't over. Not yet. The forest let them go, but it didn't let them forget. In the days that followed, Noah barely spoke. He stayed close to Emma at all times, flinching at every creak in the floorboards, every rustle outside the window. He no longer slept through the night, and when he did, he thrashed and muttered in that same eerie language Emma had heard him speak inside the circle. Emma didn't tell the police. What would she say? That her brother had been lured into an invisible ring of ghost children in the woods behind their house? That he was being summoned by voices etched into stone? No, no one would believe her. But someone had to know the truth. Someone had to understand what had happened, what was happening, and Emma was going to be that person. She returned to the library the next day, her hands trembling as she carried in the walkie-talkie Noah had dropped. It still worked, still hissed, with static from time to time, as if the voices hadn't quite given up. She kept it in her backpack, zipped inside a pouch, like a secret she wasn't ready to share. Mrs. Adler was waiting at the counter. "I thought you'd be back," she said quietly. Emma nodded. "There's more, isn't there?" Mrs. Adler didn't answer with words. She motioned for Emma to follow her through a door marked "Staff Only," down a hallway, through a locked door, into a tiny office with walls lined in dusty filing cabinets. From one drawer, she pulled out a thin, leather-bound journal. "I shouldn't have this," she said, brushing it off. "But I've kept it hidden all these years. It belonged to Elijah Croft, a preacher, one of the first settlers in this region, back in the 1800s. He lived near these woods. He documented things." Emma opened the journal with care. The pages were stained with age and covered in elegant, looping handwriting. But it was the drawings that stopped her breath. Charcoal sketches of circles of stones, symbols nearly identical to the ones she had seen. Faces, trees with eyes, children kneeling in rings of candlelight. She read, "They speak to the pure of heart, but they are not angels. They are the old ones, the forgotten ones, born before the first tree. They take shape in the minds of children, for the children listen, the children believe. They demand tribute every generation, and if none is given, they will come above the roots and take what they choose. The stone circles hold them, for now, but the stones must never fall." Emma's blood ran cold. Another page. "We built the first circle when the Wexler boy disappeared. We thought it might appease them. It did not. The voices only grew louder. One night I heard them in my dreams, whispering. To my own son, I moved him away, far from the woods. But still I hear them. Still I feel them watching." Emma looked up. He tried to stop them. He knew. Mrs. Adler nodded. "Most people forgot. Elijah died poor and mad, raving about the forest beneath the forest. But I believed him, especially after my brother." Emma flipped to the final page. One line, scrawled in red ink. "If you break the circle, you free the child, but invite their wrath." Emma sat back, staring at the words. She had broken the circle. She had freed Noah, and now they were angry. Back home. Emma noticed subtle changes. The trees outside their window seemed closer than before. The birds that once sang at dawn had gone silent. And the stone she had kicked over in the circle? She found it one morning, on their porch, damp with dirt, resting neatly on the welcome mat like a warning. They weren't done. That night, Noah woke screaming. "They were in the house," he sobbed, shaking. "One of them touched my hand. It was cold, Em, like ice." Emma checked every room, every closet, every lock. Nothing. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them home. That breaking the circle hadn't ended the ritual. It had loosened it. The journal's warning echoed in her head. The stones must never fall. She needed to find out what the stones were, what they were holding back. Emma returned to the woods, this time during daylight. Noah stayed with Mrs. Adler, safe under her watchful eye. Emma brought the map again, the journal tucked under her arm, a bundle of sage sticks, and a camping lantern that didn't rely on batteries. She walked deeper than she had before, past the second circle, past the well. And then she found it. The third circle. It was nearly hidden under vines and leaves, older than the others, half buried in the forest floor. But unlike the others, this one was broken. 2 of the stones had been knocked over. Something had escaped. The air around it felt wrong, thick and oily, like breathing through a wet rag. Emma stepped into the circle and immediately felt lightheaded. Her vision blurred, her legs weak. Then a voice, not a whisper this time, but clear and sharp like a knife. He was promised. She turned. A figure stood in the trees. Not a child. Tall, lean, draped in shadow. Its face was obscured, too blurry to see but its eyes. Its eyes burned white like distant stars in a pitch-black sky. "The boy is ours." Emma stepped back. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "He's mine." The figure tilted its head, almost curious. "Then give us another." Her blood turned to ice. "What?" "Balance must be kept. The stones are broken. Tribute must be paid. Choose, or we choose for you." The forest rippled, the air pulsing, like a heartbeat. And then the figure was gone. Emma stumbled back, breath ragged, heart pounding. She didn't know how she made it out of the forest. She didn't remember the walk back to the car, only that she slammed the door behind her, locked it, and sat there for a long time, clutching the journal to her chest. That night, she watched Noah sleep. He looked peaceful for once, curled up with his stuffed dinosaur, his breathing steady. But outside, past the window, the forest waited. The choice hung in the air like a storm cloud. They wanted balance. They wanted someone. And now, Emma had to decide who would pay the price. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat by Noah's door with a kitchen knife in one hand and the walkie-talkie in the other, her back pressed against the wall, every light in the house turned on. The journal lay open beside her, pages dog-eared, smudged with her fingerprints, and tears. The words circled through her mind like a mantra. Tribute must be paid. Choose, or we choose for you. The forest had spoken, and Emma knew it would come back. She also knew something else, something she had tried not to admit. The stones weren't a gate. They were a seal, a warning written in stone and moss, meant to hold, something ancient in the roots of the world. And when she had kicked that stone from the circle, thinking she was saving her brother, she had opened it. Now something was loose, hungry, patient, and cunning, and it wanted Noah. She spent the next morning making a plan. She didn't tell Mrs. Adler. She didn't tell the neighbors. If anyone knew, they'd try to stop her. Or worse, think she was losing her mind. She packed 2 backpacks, one for her, one for Noah. Each one held water, food, a compass, spare batteries, a first aid kit, and a hand-drawn copy of the map. She packed Elijah Croft's journal, the broken walkie-talkie, and the carved stone she had found on the porch. She even added a handful of salt, remembering old stories about protections and wards. She didn't know what she would face, but she was going to be ready. Emma waited until nightfall, when the town had quieted and the stars blinked down through thin clouds. The air was still, heavy with that eerie pressure she now recognized as a sign that they were close. She woke Noah gently. He stirred and opened his eyes, sleep-drunk and confused. "Are we leaving?" he asked. Emma nodded. "We're going to fix this. But I need you to trust me, okay?" He didn't hesitate, just nodded and took her hand. They entered the forest together. This time, the trees didn't resist. They seemed to part for them, silent and watchful, as if the forest already knew they were coming. Emma led Noah along the same path she had taken before, through the curling branches and soft earth, past the moss-covered stones and the twisted roots that coiled like snakes beneath the soil. The night air grew colder with every step until their breath puffed out in clouds and Noah began to shiver. She held his hand tightly. The forest deepened. Time felt strange here. Slower, syrupy, like walking through a dream you couldn't wake from. Sounds came and went. Whispered names floated past their ears. Sometimes they heard the crunch of footsteps behind them, but when they turned, there was nothing. Eventually, they reached the third circle. The broken one. The ancient one. It looked different now. More stones had fallen. The ground was cracked, a jagged black line splitting through the center like the earth had been torn open from below. A strange mist curled up from the cracks, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The trees around it groaned like old bones, shifting in the dark. Emma turned to Noah. "Stay here. Don't move, no matter what you see. Do you understand?" His lip trembled, but he nodded. "Will you come back?" "I promise." She stepped into the circle. This time, it didn't resist her. The air turned thick. The mist coiled around her feet, tugging at her like fingers. The broken stones buzzed faintly, a deep, humming sound that vibrated in her chest. She dropped to her knees and opened the journal. She flipped to the last page and tore it out. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the walkie-talkie. It hissed, crackled, then a voice, clearer than ever before. "He is marked. You cannot take him." Emma held the walkie up. "I broke your circle. That gave me a choice, and I'm making it now." A silence. Then the forest laughed. Not one laugh, but many. Children, adults, deep ancient tones that rattled through the trees like dry leaves in a storm. "You would trade your life for his?" Emma didn't answer with words. She pulled the carved stone from her bag, the one that had appeared on her porch. She held it above her head, and with all her strength she smashed it against the cracked stone in the center of the circle. The forest screamed. A wind erupted from the earth, howling upward through the cracks. The trees bent backward, their branches writhing like serpents. Light burst from the circle, blinding, searing white, and for a moment Emma felt everything. She saw them, the forest children. Not ghosts, not spirits. Echoes, left behind by something older, something buried beneath. The roots. They weren't the danger. They were bait. Lures to bring children close enough for the thing beneath to take them. She saw its shape. It was not a creature. It was absence. A hollow god made of roots and rot and memory. It didn't move through the world. It pulled it in, piece by piece, and it wanted Noah because he was the last link in the chain. One more child every 20 years. One more soul to feed the hunger below. But Emma had broken the chain, and now the forest was bleeding. She opened her eyes. She was lying just outside the circle. Noah was beside her, tears streaming down his face. "I thought you were gone," he whispered. Emma coughed. Her chest ached. Her arms were scraped and bruised. "I'm here," she said. Around them, the stones had crumbled. The circle was gone. The mist had lifted. The forest was still, silent, but not in the way it had been before. Not heavy with malice, just quiet, and above, the stars were shining, clear, unbroken. They made their way out as dawn painted the horizon in gold. The walkie-talkie was dead. The forest didn't whisper anymore, and Emma knew, deep in her soul, that the seal was broken. For good this time. The forest beneath the forest had been pushed back, cut off from its chain of offerings. The price had been paid, but not in blood, in defiance, and in love. As they stepped back into the yard, Noah looked up at her. "It's over?" he asked. Emma looked at the woods behind them. Now just trees again, not monsters. "Yeah," she said, "it's over." But even as the words left her mouth, she thought of the journal, of Elijah Croft, of the line he had written in red. "The stones must never fall." Emma glanced back one last time. Then she led Noah inside and closed the door. Autumn arrived gently in Willow Creek. The leaves turned brittle and golden, falling in soft spirals onto sidewalks and porches. School buses returned to their morning routes. Halloween decorations began popping up. Plastic skeletons, carved pumpkins, ghostly bedsheets flapping in front yards. To the rest of the town, life moved forward in its usual rhythm. But for Emma and Noah, nothing would ever be the same. The surface, they looked fine. Normal. Emma smiled when she picked up groceries. She walked Noah to the bus stop every morning, waving as the doors hissed shut behind him. She laughed with the neighbors when they talked about the sudden cold front or the squirrels stealing from bird feeders. But underneath it all, a quiet tension remained, an invisible thread pulling at her spine, taut and ready to snap. Because Emma knew better than most, monsters didn't live in fairy tales. They lived in the soil. They waited in the cracks. And sometimes they remembered you. A week after the forest, Emma returned the journal to Mrs. Adler. The old woman held it like an artifact, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. "You broke it," she said softly, looking at Emma over her glasses. "You did what none of us ever could." Emma nodded. "It's done." But Mrs. Adler didn't smile. She closed the journal slowly, her fingers resting on the leather cover. "The forest has always taken something," she said. "Each time. A child, a life, a piece of the soul. You stop the cycle, but stopping something doesn't erase it." Emma swallowed hard. "Then what do I do?" Mrs. Adler gave a tired sigh. "You watch. You remember. You pass it on. Stories, Emma. They're more powerful than you think." Life settled into something resembling peace. Noah slept through the night again. The whispers were gone. The shadows in the corners of the house stopped twitching. The walkie-talkie remained silent. Emma placed it in a shoebox in the back of her closet, wrapped in a towel like a fragile relic. But even then, the past crept in around the edges. Noah would sometimes stop mid-sentence, tilt his head and whisper, "Did you hear that?" Emma never did. Once he asked her, "Do you think the other kids are free now? The ones from the woods?" Emma didn't know what to say. She wanted to believe they were, that the souls trapped in those ancient roots had finally been released, scattered like dust in the morning sun. But part of her feared they were still out there, half-formed, hollow, searching for something they didn't remember losing. She only said, "I hope so." Then came the letter. It arrived on a gray Thursday, tucked neatly inside their mailbox. No stamp, no return address. The envelope was made of parchment, the kind that smelled like smoke and time. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in thin, spidery ink. "You've seen what lies beneath. You've walked where few dare to step. They are not gone, just sleeping. Until someone listens again." There was no signature, just a symbol at the bottom of the page. A small, perfect circle made of 12 tiny stones. Emma stared at it for a long time. She felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, not even dread, just knowing. That night, she stood by the window as rain tapped gently against the glass. The trees at the back of the yard swayed in the wind, their branches brushing each other like whispers in a forgotten tongue. Emma opened the window and leaned out slightly, breathing in the scent of wet leaves and distant thunder. The forest stood still, but she could feel it watching, not with malice, not with anger, just waiting. For another story, for another voice, for another crack in the silence. She closed the window and pulled the curtains shut, and in the darkness behind her, the walkie-talkie clicked on, a burst of static, then a voice. Faint, familiar. "Emma, plug in your headphones, turn off the lights, and dive deep into one of the most unsettling tales you'll ever hear. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more haunting stories, because the next one might be closer than you think." Share this story with someone who still believes the forest is just trees.